to you. Later on, after the 10 o'clock news on the Art Lewis Show, we'll talk to Alan Stamps about a youth program that has to do with youth coming out of foster care. And at 11 o'clock this morning, we will learn about events at the YMCA in Saginaw. But for this hour, as part of our 75th year of broadcasting, which officially happens on August 11th, we've been bringing back and talking to some of the talent over the years that made this the great place it is. And today is no exception, except how I introduce him. Our guest is...
Have you all got any local radio news programs in the spare city of yours? All I get's commercials and a lot of that apple pan dowdy.
The Cameron Knowles Show is on the air.
There is no controlling legal authority.
The phones are now open for you.
Hello?
That's the trouble around here. Talk, talk, talk. Oh, sometimes I think I must go mad.
Now, here's Cameron.
If you mention extortion again, I'll have your legs broken.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the People Poll. Wes is answering the phones this afternoon. You'll talk to him before we talk to one another.
Well, that voice belongs to the one and only Cameron Knowles. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning, Art. How are you?
Well, we're doing well, thanks. Hope you are, too. So let's...
Well, I'm doing fine.
Before we get into your history here and what you've been doing, where are you located now and how long have you been there?
Sure. I work with Duke University's health system. I'm a social media manager for the organization, and I joined here in December of 2019.
Just before the pandemic. Good timing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I know. I came to work, and 6 weeks later, everybody else went home. But yeah, no, I work with a really talented group of individuals, and largely around the topic of communications. And my focus is working on social media, content creation, analysis, that sort of thing.
And prior to that, you had some stints with some sports franchises too, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked immediately after working at WSGW. I joined the Saginaw Spirit hockey team during their inaugural season, where, of course, you and I worked together again when you were working, doing public address announcing and other sorts of activities with them.
I'm still hanging in there with them, too, but not doing that.
That's awesome. And I worked there for the better part of 5.5 years and then moved to Durham, North Carolina. And I worked with the Durham Bulls Baseball Club for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And the recession hit in 2008, and I set up my own marketing and advertising business after that.
Mm-hmm. So let's go back to the radio days. What brought you to broadcasting and then to WSGW?
Yeah, that's a great question. For being a young teenager, and my dad, high school, what do you want to do for a living? And I told him I like to write. And he then said, well, what are you going to do to make money?
Good, smart man.
And right, he was. But I wrote for my high school newspaper and yearbook, and then I went to Central Michigan University for my freshman year of school, and caught on with the newspaper, but ended up having some conflicts with the editorial staff over certain policies I didn't agree with. And a friend of mine who I'd met on campus introduced me to journalism through broadcasting. So I jumped over and started working on first television newscasts and then college radio newscasts, and I continued on that path.
And you landed here.
I did, yeah. In 1988 or 1989, a mentor of mine at Central Michigan University, a professor by the name of David Schock, was involved in setting up conferences where broadcasters from around the state would come in and meet the broadcast students at CMU.
Right.
And he had introduced me to my first broadcast job. I worked at a radio station in Clare briefly, and then was working actually at the AM station that was associated with WSGW, now WCEN. They had an AM station. I was doing news there. My news director was Joe Kalika, great guy. And so I was already kind of working professionally as a broadcaster. And Dave Maurer came to these conferences looking for, I guess, recruits for the news team.
Yep.
And late 88, early 89, we interviewed. And in April of 1989, I started as a news stringer with the station covering Midland City Council.
Mm-hmm. And one thing led to another, and before you knew it, you had a talk show. How did that happen?
Well, that is a circuitous route, my friend.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
It was. I, as a news reporter, and I worked with a great bunch of news folks at WSGW over the years. I was curious, and I was always looking at different ways to communicate and spread messages, and writing stories for a newscast or anchoring a newscast was only one of those. But frankly, what you do, hosting a talk show, is another way. It's a bigger format. You could tell more of the story. And I lobbied for quite some time when you would go on vacation to try to sit in on one of your shows.
Yeah.
And eventually the dog's nose was under the tent eventually. And, but I took a side turn. In 1995, 96, I'd gone on a journalism fellowship to Germany and met an individual who worked at KTRH in Houston, Texas.
I remember that.
And they invited me to come there to be a news reporter. And, I worked in Houston as a news reporter, one of the biggest radio news stations in the country, for about a year and a half.
You were doing some NASA coverage, weren't you?
Well, I was. Yeah, I mean, I was a beat reporter. So I had, there was a county that I covered, and I turned history in Texas into a beat, which was really cool, and NASA as a beat. And then things were very difficult there at the radio station for a variety of reasons. And I ended up applying to and being hired at Johnson Space Center in their media relations team.
Right.
And I worked there for several months, and then ran into Dave Maurer again at a broadcast convention. And he asked me, are you done with radio? And how many people have ever asked you that? It's a blood-borne pathogen. You can't get it out of your system.
Yeah, no, most of them ask me, when the heck are you going to get out of radio?
And so I told Dave, I said, well, if I ever get back into it, I'd probably want to do a talk show. And I don't know, then the gears started grinding back in Saginaw. And by October of 1997, the station had invited me back to do an afternoon talk show.
Yeah, and it really was. Those were the heydays of it, really, when we think about it. Because today, most stations, is live in the morning like we are, but then they syndicate the afternoons for the most part.
Well, yeah, I mean, every industry, I suppose, thinks about having but if you think about it, Art, I mean, this was a radio station in the mid-1990s. We had a news staff of like 6 or 7 people, and a live morning show, a live midday talk show, and a live afternoon talk show.
Yep.
I mean, it was incredibly dedicated to the service of the community, which in some nostalgic sense is what broadcasting is supposed to be about.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because in many ways we still are. The only exception is we don't have the live afternoon talk show, but community involvement in this building, as led by our general manager, Mark Thomas, is exceptional. I mean, we still look at the community first and do a lot of community involvement things. It's been tradition here. It's what we survive on.
That's absolutely
really.
true.
Yeah, it's what we survive on, really, when you think about it. All right, hang on. I got to take a break. You remember those, which where we make money. We'll be back. We're also, he doesn't know this, folks, but we're going to open the phones. So if you'd like to chat with Cameron, you can give us a call at 989-752-6111. That hasn't changed.
I could still mention that one.
989-752-6111. Cameron Knowles, our guest, as we celebrate our 75th here at WSGW. We'll be back with Cameron. Let me take a moment to talk about my car dealer, McDonald Ford in Freeland. Now, you've probably noticed it's getting harder and harder to find products that say made in America, right? And now with the uncertainty of tariffs, it's become even more important. McDonald Ford, in anticipation of tariffs, stock their lot with tariff-free vehicles and many more en route. Not only are they tariff-free, but Ford is offering employee pricing for everyone. That means you pay the same price as Ford employees. In addition, Chrysler and import buyers considering a Ford receive the lowest possible price offered. Chevy truck buyers can now get the truck they've always wanted, the F-150 Ford, also at employee pricing. So you see, now is the right time to visit McDonald Ford, M47 in Freeland, for the best selection and lowest possible price. Don't let tariffs prevent you from getting the vehicle of your choice at a price you can afford. Visit McDonald Ford in Freeland today. Remember, tariff-free and employee pricing for everyone.
Let's face it, nothing makes you look...
Comments for our buddy Cameron Knowles. We start in Saginaw with Rodney. Rodney, you're on with Cameron.
Thank you, Art. Hey, Cam, great to hear from you again, my friend. I appreciate this.
Thanks for calling.
It was great to... Yeah, it was great to hear that on the run-up of you coming on. That I put this on my calendar, of course, so I wanted to make sure I didn't miss this particular Art Lewis show. So, but you know, your time in Saginaw here and on WSGW was great. I mean, I was coming away from getting done with college, and my time listening to the radio stations was changing because I was growing up, and WSGW became more of my kind of listening flavor, and then you popped on the scene with your talk show, and what was great about it is just like what Art has done all these years, with interviews with everybody around the area. That you really also had very good quality shows. It just wasn't filling airspace, and you talked about some very good topics. You had great guests, and it was a perfect fit, and it's great to hear from you again.
Well, Rodney, I really appreciate that, and of course I remember you, and we've been in touch quite a bit on Facebook over the years, which has been a great tool. But no, that's very kind of you. And, I really did want to put a lot of time and effort into the production of the programs. We're roughly the same age. And, of course, we're talking about 25 years ago that I was on the air. I felt like I had to really make the program appeal to people that were our age to bring them into an AM radio environment. In fact, that was one of the charges that the station gave me, was to bring a new group of fans and audience into the program. So it's very, thank you.
Yes, clearly it worked, and I'm just one of many, but I think it was clearly the topics and the quality and you have a radio voice, if I might say. So
he's got a face for it too.
Yeah. Both the face for TV and radio. So there you go.
They say that the video killed the radio star. Well, the internet finished us off.
No, we participate in it now. I mean, that's the difference. In this day and age, you have to be digitally conscious, or you were out of it.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's right. You have to adapt or move on.
That's it. Rodney, good hearing from you.
Again. Great to hear you, as always, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.
All right, next we go to Nashville, Tennessee. Kurt is with us in Nashville. Kurt, good morning.
Good morning, Art, and good morning, Cam. It's great to hear both of your voices.
Well, thank you, Kurt. Kurt's another alumni of WSGW.
Yes, he is.
People who don't recognize his voice, and many other endeavors.
And now, I assume, still works with one of our great hosts, Dave Ramsey.
I do, yes. But Cameron, I have told him this before on social, but it's great to be able to say it in person somewhat. When I started at WSUW, I was such a green reporter. I had worked for the competition. You remember the startup that started there in Saginaw that tried to take on WSUW?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just not very good. I didn't understand journalism very much. I just kind of fell into it. And when I started at SGW, Dave Maurer gave me a shot. And Cameron was the person that I tried to be. He is a great journalist. And every time a story would come up, if I sat down in front of the computer to write the story, I was thinking, how would Cameron do this? How can I be as good as Cameron? And it really pushed me, and I really appreciate it.
Well, Kurt, that's very kind of you. I can tell you had such an enthusiasm for broadcasting and great raw materials. I mean, you really had a sense of what it meant to tell a story, and that's translated and done you well over your career. But, yeah, it was a real joy to work with you in the newsroom back then. Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, it was great. And when I was your competition, you remember the big story in town was the big standoff on Wadsworth in 1993 with Harvest and Plumie Carter.
Yep, I sure do. That went on for days.
Yeah, so I was working at the competition, and again, I was listening to SGW, and I was like, how is Cameron handling this? How do you do this? How do you do a police standoff that goes on for, I don't know, that was like 48 hours at least. And again, you just pushed me, and it was just a pleasure, and you really launched me into everything I've done since then, so I appreciate you.
Well, you deserve everything you've earned, Kurt. Thank you.
All right, Kurt, thanks a lot. Say hi to Dave Ramsey for all of us.
We will do. Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye now. So next up, we're heading to Fayetteville, North Carolina, and Ken is with us. Good morning, Ken. You're on with Cameron.
Cameron, a blast from your past, and hello, brother Arthur, too. We don't want to make you feel left out.
Ken the cabbie, there he is.
Oh, my gosh. Ken, so over the years, I had a number of people who would become, quote-unquote, regular callers. And Ken was so enthusiastic for former President Ronald Reagan that I made him our official Reagan correspondent on the radio station.
Yep.
Ken, it's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear yours, too. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah, we need to get together. We're only a couple of counties away from one another.
Yeah, I'm down here. I moved down here a couple of years ago. By the way, speaking of the former president, you were one of the people that I thought of back in June of, if I can do this without getting emotional, back in June of 2004 when the good Lord called him home. And I was just like, I wonder how Cam's doing, and just... Then I ran into you on Facebook, and it's like, I wonder if that... And I sent you a message. I'm like, I guess we'll see if this is him, and if this is him.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're one of the people who made the program what it was, and I really appreciate you staying in touch all these years. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Ken.
Well, and speaking, and also like Roger, it was one of the competing radio stations. They changed their country music format and started dropping the older, what I call the old good country. Do you remember our first conversation or the first thing that I called in about?
I'm afraid I don't. Go ahead.
It was back in 1998, and I think I was on the phone with you for like 20 minutes. It was who?
I do remember that.
Who would you pick for the Republican nomination in 2000? The only thing was for about 18 minutes, I was discussing the virtues of why we need President Reagan back, and I think the last 10 seconds, I said if I had to go with somebody, I said I'd go for Alexander Haig. Then I thought about it. I said, then I switched it up. I said if he would run, I would vote for him, even though he's a Democrat. And that's Sam Nunn out of the great state of Georgia.
There you go. Yeah, that was great insight.
Okay.
By the way, Art, if you ever need somebody to fill in for you, you know, you already know I'm good on the radio.
I don't know what it is.
Out something.
I don't know what it is. Maybe it's my age, but all of a sudden, a lot of people are volunteering to fill in for me. I'm not sure what that's all about.
I did. You notice I said fill in once in a while. Let me rephrase it. Let me fill in once in a while. Not come in and take over.
Yeah, I understand. All right, Ken. Listen, it's great to hear from you. Call anytime.
I will.
Thanks.
Be well, Ken. Take care.
Yep. Bye-bye.
You too.
All right, Ken the cabbie. Boy, there's when he had called earlier knowing that you were going to be on, and I said, well, call back after about 15 minutes or so.
And he'll probably call every day for the next month.
Maybe. But, it was guys like that that really made the shows back then. There were a lot of characters, and...
Well, absolutely. And that's what made the program go around. It wasn't just about what I had to say. It was what the community had to say.
Yeah, it really was, and still is in many ways. We're going to take a break, Cam. Hang on. We'll be back. We're talking to Cameron Knowles. If you'd like to chat with him, 989-752-6111. For the best garage. WSGW and journalist extraordinaire, Cameron Knowles, as we help celebrate our 75th anniversary of broadcasting here at WSGW. And another caller, Cameron. Let's talk to Ron in Midland. Ron, good morning. You're on with Cameron Knowles.
Hi, Cam. Ron Beacom, retired from MCTV, very part-time at Delta PBS. Been on Art Show a couple times to promote some documentaries I've been involved in, so always grateful for that, Art. Yep. I crossed paths a lot with Cameron back when he lived around here, worked around here. I do see online, Cam, that you not only over the years have promoted hockey, you still play hockey. And the main thing I wanted you to talk about today, Cam, is share with the listeners the documentary that you did on the little foreign car. I thought you did a great job, and it was just fascinating.
Well, Ron, it's so good to hear from you. And, yeah, we go back probably as long as I worked at WSGW. I lived in Midland when I lived in the Tri-Cities area, and we had a lot of interactions, Ron and I did, on projects over the years, including I remember hosting, if you remember Y2K and how people were wound up about that. We hosted a number of community forums on MCTV back then, so I appreciated our partnership. Yeah, you're very kind to mention that. Yeah, back in 2009, in fact, this was one of the last interactions that I had with WSGW professionally. I was in between, let's say I was in between career opportunities. I had written a fellowship to go to Germany on an international journalist exchange program that I've been active in for years. And out of that experience, I wrote the fellowship to demonstrate multimedia reporting because I didn't have any television station to work with. So I was doing reports live on WSGW, and I also was putting content onto MySpace, if you can believe it.
Oh my God!
Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. The end result of that was I had enough information and some video that I produced a documentary about a automobile that was made in East Germany before East and West Germany came back together, called the Trabant. And it was the people in the United States who owned this little car and the struggle that they had to keep it on the road. And and Ron and I talked a lot about that project, and we aired it, if I'm not mistaken, on MCTV multiple times. Is that not right, Ron?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
So it aired in a couple of film festivals, including the Saginaw Film Festival, and a friend of mine who owns the Good Beans Cafe in Flint has an art festival. It aired there. And I learned a great lesson from that, and that is to never self-finance a documentary film.
Yeah.
But it was a great narrative. It was a great narrative, and it was a story that probably nobody else would tell. So thanks, Ron, for remembering that. That's very kind.
And share a couple of unique features because of how basic that car was put together.
It was the Yugo of its day, wasn't it?
Oh, well, the Yugo was a Bentley compared to the Trabant. I mean, it had a gravity-fed fuel system. If you forgot to turn the fuel system off, all the fuel would leak out. People drove with an oil pan. They put it under the car because it leaked so much and poured that back in to use the fuel. And it ran on 50 to 1 oil to gas mixture. So it was like running your lawnmower.
Oh, so it was a two-cycle.
So, yeah, exactly. So
interesting.
But people love them. People that have them love them. You could repair them with boat parts because no, they weren't using standard automobile parts. I could go on and on. Oh, and I also have about 850 DVDs of that. If anybody wants to buy one.
Now I have to tell you guys, Cameron, you'll get a kick out of this. Yeah, I've known Ron a long time, but it took a long, long, long time for me to finally be the subject of one of his videos. I had to get old. And during COVID, he put me on the life after 50+ thing that he had. So I was an old coot that came to the house, shot me doing the show from the house.
It was a great feature, Cameron, because I heard explain why he's still doing what he does.
Yeah, in many ways. Well, listen, great to hear from you.
All right, take care, guys. Ron. Thank you.
Ron, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. There are just tons of stories, Cameron, as you well know. We, because of this business, have been fortunate enough to cross paths with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And it really, to me, that's the most enjoyable part of the job. I have to take one more break here, and then we'll get back to one more session with Cameron Knowles as WSGW celebrates its 75th year of broadcasting. The official date, October 11th.
Did you see Congresswoman Kristen McDonald?
And we return for one more segment with Cameron Knowles, former talk show host, newscaster at WSGW many, many moons ago. Also, when the Saginaw Spirit first came into existence in late 2001, 2002, Cameron wrote, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cam, I think it was like a 6-page proposal on why the Spirit needed communications and promotions. And they were wise enough to hire you.
Well, you flatter me. But when I was working with the radio station, of course, Dick Garber and Craig Goslin and the organization were forming. And I love hockey. And I had seen franchises come and go. And I really wanted to see the franchise stick to the community. Now, in retrospect, I realized how ridiculous this was because with that team and the people that were involved with it, there were no worries. And in fact, they brought the Memorial Cup, they brought the Ontario Hockey League All-Star Game, and have just become a real destination for the community and a real jewel in the community. But yeah, I not knowing, I kind of jotted down some ideas that I had used to promote my talk show, just as far as being engaged in the community and communications techniques. And back there, we things like newsletters and email, using email to stay in touch with people and engage your stakeholders. And I was fortunate enough to a friend, Laura Biggins, introduced me to Dick Garber, and we sat down and went over these notes. And it started. I joined them in June of 2002.
Well, what's interesting is Laura's still there with Dick. Dick is still there. Craig is still there. I'm still there. Let's see, who else would you know? Brian Prout. Remember Prouter? Brian,
absolutely.
Brian was there in the beginning. He left for a couple of years. He's back now. He's the assistant general manager. And and Danny Evans. Did you know Danny Evans?
I knew Danny. Yeah, of course. Yeah,
they're all still there.
Over Ontario by bus with him.
Yep. Well, they're all still there.
Lindsay McDougall. Yeah.
Yep. Lindsay's still there. Lindsay's still there.
Tremendous commitment to the community.
Absolutely. Well, another commitment, or at least this is somebody who should be committed. But you'll recognize this voice. It belongs to the one and only Randy Howell, former employee here.
Party on.